This idea that we can't sort of handle a ballot that is, a dozen or two people long with 5 choices is just not true. So those are some of the insights I'm seeing from ranked choice voting in New York City. But again, the big thing is that these viable candidates, these city council candidates, these mayoral candidates, they're able to stay in their race. It changes their viability. It changes their mental calculations about getting in the race. And we are going to see for the first time, I think, a dramatic shift in the New York City Council race. We are currently at something like 11 out of 51 city council members in New York City are women. 11 out of 51 in New York City. That's bad. It's really bad. I believe you will probably see anywhere from a 2 to 3-fold increase, both because of the number of women who are running, but also because of RCV elections. So why does that matter? Like, why does it matter to have more people of color and women in public office? Like, we just do government better. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat that anymore for us. We literally do government better. We pass more bills. We use our tax dollars more efficiently. Budgets get passed on time. And we're seeing that when more women are in leadership, pro-democracy initiatives get passed. We can look at the Virginia legislature last session to see that. One of the things I think that we're seeing when we see more folks run in RCV elections is that because you get to rank, it's no longer like, oh, don't run against Mary. You're going to lose all your political capital. No one will ever talk to you. You'll never get an endorsement. You'll never get funding again. It changes that, how you're seen within the community. And then you get to change the dialogue of what's happening in that primary or general election, because you get to have that conversation that, and it may make some of our more senior elected officials better. It may have them think about things that they have not thought about before and bring that perspective. It's sharing that political capital instead of dividing it. So,
but I think that we're seeing that more and more women, and especially more and more women of color, are realizing that that ranked choice voting is going to open up that opportunity so that it's not the same old person who's ever there in the seat to begin with. And we know how much our Indigenous folks continue to face barriers in the electoral process, especially historically, because of the lack of information, distance to polling centers, and those sort of things. But what we're seeing here in Minnesota is more and more participation of our folks of color. Right. I'm the first American Indian woman in the Minnesota Senate ever. There's only been 2 men prior to me. This is huge. Our African American community is the most politically active and engaged in the country. So that's really something to be proud of. The number of eligible Asian American voters in Minnesota grew by 43% between 2018 and 2012 and 2018, and the largest share are Hmong population. And we're seeing that displayed, right here on this grid in Minnesota. And it's women that are stepping up because we know that the barriers and the rules that the typical historic voting process presented did not work in favor of women, let alone women of color. And so for us, it will mean getting out there and speaking to those groups within our community, building up voter registration, access, letting them know just where and when and how to vote within the community, and really being that role model in our communities, saying, yes, you can. We did it. You can do it. We need to hear your voice here in our state legislature. And so it'll be some work for all of us, but I think we're all up to it and certainly dedicated to the task.
I took my team and I, we really took time to dig deeper into people's values and to have conversations that really were rooted in values and people's hopes and dreams for the future, because that's really what our politics should be about, and we do politics differently by focusing on those shared values together. And in addition to that, I really shared with people about ranked choice voting, because then it pushed folks to actually go out to the polls and to vote and to figure out who they wanted to rank from 1 through 6, instead of just, opting out completely. And so to be able to have that to share was so important. We doubled our voter turnout that year in 2019.
When we talk to people about ranked choice voting, Most people that I've talked to have been really on board. And I think that actually it was Councilmember Yang's race that kind of brought people on board, because there were like some really good candidates. There were several really strong candidates, and being able to rank them instead of having to choose just one made people feel better about how they were going to proceed. It made them feel like they weren't saying everybody else is terrible. We're not saying that. We're just saying like, you're either my number one or my number two. And I think that that actually like eased the pressure for a lot of folks, especially since we have overlapping districts in our area. It made people feel a lot more comfortable.
But I think what works to talk to people about it is actually to like address their questions one by one. I mean, people want to be taken seriously. They don't want to feel like they're being bamboozled in some way. And I think, the more that we can, there were a number of videos that different groups put out that kind of showed how ranked choice voting worked. And so the more that we were able to like post those on our social media or use those in our training for phone banks, I think that helped when people had questions about like, well, what does this mean for my ballot, and what does it mean for whoever it is that I want to select to be in that seat. So I think again, it just goes back to meeting people where they are, answering their questions, and finding nice, quick ways to explain what can be a complicated process to them.
Yes, I'm super proud of all of our freshman legislators, even the men, but especially the women. I think they've just done incredible work, and I love to see. I love how we support each other in the work that we're doing, and how we really all have kind of different focus areas. There's overlap, but we look at everything with this lens of equity and this lens of, to some extent, feminism that I think a lot of our predecessors didn't necessarily share.
Okay.
And that's,
yeah,
and that's not like me being rude or unfair or anything like that, or even shady. It's just that, we're coming from a different space. And when you come from that space, when you've lived that, when you haven't had, paid time off to be with your child after your kid is born, or when you have experienced being discriminated against in a certain setting, you're going to come at lawmaking with a different perspective, and one that more, more robustly represents the entirety of the state of Minnesota. So it's been fantastic. It's been really great. And I would say like we're all good friends, even if we don't always agree.
What we did is every time when we have a door knock or a phone bank, and there's a part where you do like a 30-minute training prior to volunteers actually going out to the doors or calling, we incorporated a conversation around ranked choice voting in that training, so that brand new volunteers who came in and didn't know about it had some sort of idea on how they would articulate that to whoever they were talking to over the phone or at the door. So that piece is really important, because that training, it's not just about making sure that our volunteers have what they needed, but it's about political education. Like, we train the volunteers so that they can train our voters on how to do that successfully when they're at the polling location.
Mm-hmm.
As we're in, Minnesota has a part-time legislature, so we're kind of towards the end of our sessions, and we're in what's called a special session now to complete our budget. And, some of those policy bills, especially around voting, we're hoping that we can continue to see some of that progress being made, but we also know at the end of the day that the House of Representatives will ensure that what we at least have in Minnesota stays put, and that we're not moving backwards as we've seen some of the other states do with some of their more oppressive voter suppression laws. So I look forward to seeing, hopefully next year, which is considered our policy year of, doing more work in the ranked choice voting space, and also just doing more work in continuing to open access to voting for more people.
I think it's going to take the very conversation that we're having right now, because the folks I know at the legislature who are against it are really worried that the general public is not going to understand how to use RCV. And so these conversations, and the more broadly we can have them, I think the better off we're going to be. And then having our constituents, having the general public reach out to those legislators and let them know that they're in support, that it's not confusing, that it's not scary to them, that they are actually excited about it, is really what it's going to take. And I think it's just as simple as that.
there were 6 women, 6 incredible women that, rose up and said, I want to run for and represent our communities in the House. Every one of them was fabulous. I mean, if I had to choose one, I could not choose one, which was, huge when you know that this is somebody that you're going to have to collaborate with and work with, right? And I liked them all. They all had so much to bring to us. So in essence, it was a way that I didn't have to choose, but it was also the opportunity for them, the candidates, to work together, to get to know each other, and to realize that at some point in the process, they're going to have to also choose or support one of them within that group. And it turned out that all of the women actually really learned to appreciate and respect each other and work with each other within the community now as well. And I think we have to take away the fear that it's all going to blow up and that the right person isn't going to get elected.
I've just been, I was near tears listening to these wonderful women elected officials at the state and city level. And it reminded me when I first got elected to the city council in St. Louis Park in 1990, I was the only woman on the city council. And now with ranked choice voting, if you look at the St. Louis Park City Council, a majority of the members are women. And the woman who's in my old seat now is a young Somali, brilliant Somali woman, Nadia Mohammed. So it's great to see this kind of change. It's really very inspiring.